So for quadratics, x squared plus 5x plus 6, we cannot isolate x. We cannot get x by itself. So for this, there are two ways to solve this equation, x squared plus 5x plus 6 equals 0. Who can give me one way? Graph it. We can graph y equals the left side and y equals the right side, and we can find when does this graph cross through y equals 0. That's one way. I know a quicker way right now. What would be a quicker way to solve this equation? Who cares? Just get out a piece of paper. I don't care what you have. What is a quicker way to solve this equation than graphing? Right. What is this process called, Mr. Bernberg? Gas. Factoring. Why don't we factor this? Two numbers that add to get 5 and multiply to get 6. It's that simple because this is just 1. Since this is just 1, I can write this as x plus 3 times x plus 2. We know we can do this because we know how to distribute x plus 3 times x plus 2. It's x squared, it's 3x, it's 2x, it's 6. You can add 3x and 2x together. You get x squared plus 5x plus 6. What are my solutions? X equals -3 and -2. Boom. Isn't that nice and easy? So we just found our two solutions. We know we could do the same thing for something like this. 2x squared plus 3x plus 2 equals 0. That doesn't work. Plus 1 equals 0. Yep, that works. We could graph, but we can also factor. Okay? We could factor this. Find two numbers that multiply to get a times c. A times c is 2. We're looking for two numbers that multiply to get 2 and add to get 3. What are the two numbers? 2 and 1. Good. We take that 2 and 1 and we will split 3x into 2x and 1x. I don't care which order you do. Maybe 1x will be easier. We then factor by grouping, and so many of us are still struggling to do this. I have nothing to pull out. There's a 1 that could be there. We get 2x plus 1 times x plus 1 equals 0. Please solve this equation. Solving this equation is the same as solving this equation, which is great, because all we did is just made this look different. -1 is one of the answers. -1/2 is the other answer. I got that other answer by solving this equation. We subtracted 1, we divided by 2. Okay? Great. Great, great, great. If I have x squareds and x's, it appears that this is all we can do. We can either factor or graph. X squareds and x's, we can factor and graph. We will learn a different way to solve this. Now, today, we will have the following. Equations with just x squareds in them. Like x squared minus 16 equals 0, or x minus 1 squared plus 4 equals 0. Where we have things being squared, but we don't have other stuff that's like bothering it. We could factor this if we wanted to. But now there's an alternate way to solve this. Who remembers from last class what we could do to solve x squared minus 16 equals 0? Mr. Clark. Add the 16 to the other side to isolate the x squared. How do I get x by itself if x is being squared? It's not squaring. square root. Now, the square root of 16 is 4, but it's the fact that my original value could have been a positive or negative. This x could have been plus or minus when I take the square root of both sides. This plus or minus x means that the answers are not just 4. My answers could be positive or negative 4. Not that the square root of 16 is plus or minus 4. It's that the square root of 16 is 4, but since I'm solving this equation and I know that a positive value and a negative value being squared gives me a positive value, that's why my answers are both plus and minus 4. So I can list it off as that or this. We can do the same thing with this equation. Don't distribute the x minus 1. Don't multiply x minus 1 times x minus 1. You could if you wanted to. But instead, isolate the stuff being squared, square root both sides, and then finish off by solving. Let me show you, and then you guys will do too. Sorry, this should be a negative 4. Add 4 to both sides. I get x minus 1 squared equals 4. Square root both sides. I get x minus 1 equals a positive or negative 2 because I'm solving an equation. So that means x minus 1 could be negative 2 or positive 2. Add 1 to both of those numbers. I get negative 1 and 3. Both 3 minus 1 squared, that's 2 squared, which is 4, minus 4 is 0. And negative 1 minus 1 is negative 2, squared, which is 4, minus 4 is 0. Solve the equation. Okay? Your turn. Please solve these two equations. Go. Isolate your stuff being squared, square root both sides. Understanding that the original value could have been positive or negative when we square root both sides. Get the x plus 2 squared by itself. No, you're good. This is good. You're right. I'm saying over here, get the x plus 2 squared by itself. Square root both sides. When you square root to solve an equation, we're going to have a plus or minus as an answer. So now square root both sides. But it's not going to just be 2 on the right side. It'll be positive 2 and negative 2 on the right side. Okay? You got a square root 4. Okay, good, good. But now you're going to have to subtract 2 from positive 2 and negative 2. It's a decent start. We're really doing this one on the left well. We can isolate the x squared. We square root both sides. We get negative 5 and positive 5. Excellent. We're a little bit intimidated by this one, so let's just do a couple of them. We add the 4, so we isolate the stuff being squared. We are now ready to square root both sides. Now when I square root both sides, I'll just have x plus 2 because the square root and the square will undo each other. It's a second power to the 1/2 power. They undo each other. On the right side, I want to just say 2, but it's really plus or minus 2. It's positive 2, it's negative 2. Now watch what I can do. If I added negative 2 or if I subtracted 2, I could write my answers as negative 2 plus or minus 2. I don't like to do this. I think this is confusing, so I'm not going to do it. Never mind. So Understanding this, I have x plus 2 equals a positive 2 and a negative 2. To solve, I will subtract 2 from everything, giving me negative 4 and 0. The positive 2 minus 2 is 0. The negative 2 minus 2 is negative 4. Okay, let's do a couple more. Okay, come on, give it a shot. We can do this. Isolate your x squared. Then square root. What's 32 divided by 2? Do you need a calculator? We all have calculators. I feel like you guys are already ready to get to Thanksgiving break. We're just like, can we just get through this day and get through Thursday and not have to do any math? Nope. Anybody else need a calculator? Yeah? 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 Anybody? Anybody else? Yeah? You know, put your phone away, please. Yeah? Who else? Who else wants one? Who's joining our class today? Put your phone away, Ms. Reyes. Like in a bag, not on a desk. This is the class policy. If anybody pushes this class policy for the rest of the day, I'm taking your phone and giving it to the AP. We cool with that? Thank you. We subtract 3 on the right side. Here, I'm going to divide 2 on the left side. Isolate what's being squared. Square root both sides. I get both positive 4 and negative 4. On the left side, on the right side, subtract 3 to isolate the x minus 2 being squared. When we square root both sides, I'm going to get positive 3 and negative 3 on the right side. I will take both of those numbers and add 2 to them to get 5 and negative 1.
Wait, how do you get 5?
I took 3, added 2. I took negative 3, added 2. Okay? This is why I don't like the plus or minus, because if you put the plus or minus and you add 2, it turns into plus or minus 5. But it's not. If I have negative 3 plus 2, I get negative 1, not negative 5. Okay? So this is why I'm telling you to do it this way. Yep. Because positive 3 plus 2 is positive 5.
Wait, why is it plus 2 not minus?
Because how do you solve this equation? You add 2. How do you solve this equation? X minus 2 equals 3.
Got it.
Add 2, right? 5 minus 2 is 3. Nice. Did you do it in your head? Okay. Do it on paper just so you know that it's true. What?
Oh, like right now.
Yeah. One of them's going to be negative. One of them's going to be positive. Very good. What about this 2? Don't square root yet until you get rid of that 2. Get rid of that 2. Then square root. You got to isolate your stuff being squared. Yes? So the problem is the square root, you didn't square root -2. We'll talk about that, though. It's a little bit more complicated than we think. I get 2. X minus 1 squared is equal to 50. You have the right idea, though. Everything's looking good. We then divide by 2 to get x minus 1 squared equals 25. I then square root both sides to get x minus 1 equals a +5 and a -5. When I add 1, I'll get -4 and +6. Both of those values plugged into the original equation will make the left side equal to 55. Okay, ready?
I'll have no solution.
Nope.
All the numbers.
Nope. Plus or minus the square root of 10. Plug in the square root of 10 into your calculator. It's something a little bit bigger than 3, right? It's a number, though. And it is a solution. We can't be intimidated by things that are not always whole numbers. The world doesn't work in whole numbers, okay? There's lots of values in between 0 and 1. How many values are there between 0 and 1? Even between 0 and 1, there's an infinite amount of values. Between 0 and 0.1, there's an infinite amount of values. So don't be afraid if things are not always whole numbers. Now, what I'd like you to do, though, is leave this as your answer. Say, Mr. Meshner, you could have either plugged in positive root 10 or negative root 10, but those are your answers. And do not give me a decimal. So, what happens if I have a situation like this? How are we going to write our answers? I'll show you. Everybody just pay attention to what I'm going to do, and it's okay that we're going to write it like this. I'm going to square root both sides and get x minus 1 equals, just like I talked about here, negative root 10 and positive root 10. I'm going to add 1 to both of those. Gosh, it's not going to be root 11. That doesn't work like that. Yeah, it'll just be 1 minus root 10 and 1 plus root 10. I'm just going to add 1 to both of these, and that's it. And I'm going to leave it like that. This is fine. If I plug this in for x, I would get 10. Okay, so let's practice putting things in this form if we don't end up with a whole number. Here we go. X minus 3 squared equals 8. Come on, come on. You don't know what the square root of 8 is not a perfect number. We could simplify the square root of 8, but honestly, I don't care if you do it or not. Instead, I would just like you 2. Leave it as the square root of 8. But understand that it's going to be a positive or a negative root 8. But then we have to add 3 to both of them.
Negative plus
Yeah, it's good. Plus a negative, plus a positive, that's good. You can either have 3 minus root 8 or 3 plus negative root 8. X minus 3 equals both positive and negative root 8. Add 3 to everything. I'll have 3 plus negative root 8 and 3 plus positive root 8. All right, this will get you ready for your quiz. We're going to do 2 more problems. All right, last 2. Do the last 2, please. Nice. More space. Let's do this problem on the left. You got it. You see, is there a nice whole number? There isn't. So we're just going to leave it as root 8. That's going to be a positive root 8 and a negative root 8. Now, minus a negative, that's the same as plus a positive, right? So just turn it into plus positive. I don't love the plus or minus. I really don't. I like the negative root 8 and the positive root 8. Then, when I square root, this squared's gone, I add 2 to everything. So I'll have 2 plus negative root 8 and 2 plus positive root 8. That's it. Those are my answers.
Does that have to be listed like on negative?
No, any order. But these are my 2 answers. 2 minus root 8, totally fine, right? Same thing. Divide by 3, what do I get? 24. So x plus 2 squared is 24. Square root. X plus 2 equals positive root 24. I'm sorry. Jeez. And negative root 28, you subtract 2. I like to add a negative 2. Negative 2 plus negative 2 plus. Could you have it like this? Yes. Could you have it like this? Root 28 minus 2. Negative root 28 minus 2. Sure. But I like to always add the opposite. I wish I taught you kids Algebra 1 so that you would have just stuck with add a negative 2 rather than having to worry about subtraction, because I don't like subtraction. Why don't I like subtraction? It makes things more confusing, exactly, because this and this are not the same. That's why I hate subtraction. What's 5 minus 2? 3. What's 2 minus 5? 3? No, it's negative 3. But watch, if I do this and that, it is the same. True, yeah. Yeah, word. Okay. All right, let's take our quiz. Now,